It's not official just yet, but we have a good idea that Andrew McCutchen will be back in 2024. What will his role be? Ben Cherington outlines his offseason plan, and Ke'Bryan Hayes has a chance to win the Platinum Glove. We're going to talk about all of that and more on today's episode of Locked On Pirates, brought to you by Jase Medical.
You are Locked On Pirates, your daily Pittsburgh Pirates podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Locked On Pirates podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates every day. Thank you so much for tuning into this show, as you always do. Can't thank you enough. My name is Ethan Smith, right there on the lower third. You can follow me on Twitter at MVP_Ethan or at Locked On Pirates. Again, today's episode is brought to you by Jase Medical, where you could save some money on some life-saving antibiotics. More on them later. As you can always tell, right there is the outline of today's episode here on Thursday, November 9th. Hope you guys are all having a great Thursday. And looking at this offseason, as we've done all this week and most of the time since the season has ended, we have pretty much a good idea that Andrew McCutchen will probably be back for the 2024 season. It is not official yet. He is technically an unrestricted free agent, willing to sign wherever he pleases to go. But you look at what the role is for Andrew McCutchen and what he would bring to this baseball team heading into next season, and it's kind of difficult, actually, because you look at what Andrew McCutchen was able to do for this Pittsburgh Pirates team this year. He was obviously a DH guy for a large portion of the year, hardly ever played in the field, was a very good hitter as well, kind of recaptured some of that magic that we've seen from Andrew McCutchen in the past, hitting the baseball. And sadly, his season was ended due to an injury later on in the year that sidelined him for the remainder of the season. And we have not gotten confirmation that Andrew McCutchen would be back just yet. He is not signed yet. He is not a Pittsburgh Pirate in 2024 by any means at the time of this recording. But I think it's implied that we know that Andrew McCutchen will, in all likelihood, be back in Pittsburgh. I think the sentiment is clear that he wants to retire a Pittsburgh Pirate. Now, going into 2024, a year that has been listed as a competitive season from the front office, they want next year to be a competitive season for this ball club. So if you are re-signing Andrew McCutchen and want him to be a part of whatever you're trying to do with the organization, then you have to figure out a role for the guy. Now, I think mostly everybody would assume that the role is probably going to be similar, if not exactly what it was in 2023. He's going to be a DH. Now, is he going to bat third again? I don't see that. I don't think he'd be batting that highly in the lineup. I'd say probably more of a 5 or a 6 guy in that batting order. But when you look at what his role could expand to and also help the roster in a lot of different ways, I think him playing a little bit of right field for this Pittsburgh Pirates team would go a very long way. Now, I'm not saying I want to see Andrew McCutchen play 80 to 100 games, 80 to 100 games over in right field. That's not something that I want to see at all. But I would like is to see the Pirates at least let him play over there every once in a while. So that way you're keeping his bat in the lineup while you're also giving other guys opportunities to play the DH role as well. One of the biggest questions with the DH role heading into 2024 is if the Pirates do indeed move Henry Davis to catcher, you have to keep his bat in the lineup. The only way to do that is to put him at DH. I don't think they really liked what they saw from Henry Davis, and I didn't like what I saw from Henry Davis whatsoever in right field. I don't think the Pirates really have any other movement that they want to do with him, maybe outside of moving him to first base. But for Henry Davis, you have to keep that bat in the lineup too. And if Eddie Rodriguez is your primary catcher, you would expect that Henry Davis is going to be the guy that's going to DH more often than not. Same could go for Jared Triolo, another guy who is going to bounce around the diamond in the infield. He could play first base, he could play third, he could play short, and he could play second. But is he going to do that every day? No. But if Jared Triolo is also hitting the baseball very well, I think you also want to keep his bat in the lineup. It's something that the Pirates have to think about because, yes, in the past they have not had to think about the DH, and it's very good that they have it now because if they didn't have the DH now in the National League, what do you do with a guy like Henry Davis? What do you do with a guy like Andrew McCutchen? Now that you have that luxury, other questions arise. Obviously, Andrew McCutchen was your primary DH for a large portion of the year last year. Henry Davis came on and did it for spurts at a time, especially after his injury. But I would think that if Andrew McCutchen were to have like a platoon role in right field where he plays about 40 to 50, maybe even 60 games in right field alongside Joshua Palacios or a free agent signing or a Connor Joe or whoever you want to throw out there, plus having kind of a DH platoon with a Henry Davis where Davis gets the primary DH role and Andrew McCutchen DHs on days that he's not playing right field, I do think that that would be very, very positive for this Pittsburgh Pirates team. Because if you're just limiting Andrew McCutchen to a DH role, that changes a lot of the things that you have to think about as a team and on your roster. Because Henry Davis, his bat has to be in the lineup for you to figure out what he can do. And you can't have two catchers on the field at the same time, as we all wish we could with Eddie Rodriguez and Henry Davis, but you can't have both. And at this point in time, I would rather it be Eddie Rodriguez behind the plate catching the ball from whoever is pitching that day and Henry Davis DHing. But if you are planning on bringing Andrew McCutchen back, which again, we all expect to happen, I think his role has to expand a little bit. I think you're going to have to play him in right field or even left field if you want to. You're going to have to let him DH every once in a while because he's getting up there in age and he's not the same Andrew McCutchen that won the MVP in 2013 and got the Pirates to 3 straight playoff appearances, but he's still a very valuable and good player. I mean, he hit the baseball very well this year. He kind of turned back the clock on the walks. I mean, we all know how cool the walks with Andrew McCutchen are for like the little bat flips that he does, but he's a very, very valuable component to what this roster is. And he's a very good mentor. He's a very good morale guy. He's going to continue to teach these young guys how to play the game of baseball at the highest level. I think he's going to be integral to this team eventually getting to the postseason, even if he's not on the roster by the time it happens. I think the lessons that he's teaching these young guys, and you could see it throughout the entire roster in 2023, are going to carry over for their entire careers. And that's something that I think the Pirates are going to use. It's going to be very valuable. It's something that I think the Pirates can continue to use. But if you are bringing Andrew McCutchen back, you have to find a steady and consistent role for him. I think personally the best option for that is, again, letting him play about 40 to 60 games in right field, letting him play about 50 to 60 games at a DH, which brings him out to about 120 games, and letting him have some rest so that some of these young guys can continue to get better, but you also keep one of your hometown heroes on your team and hopefully playing at a high level. Now, again, we'll end this with Kutch is not re-signed yet, but I would bet a lot of money that Andrew McCutchen would probably come back to the Pittsburgh Pirates. And before we get into Ben Cherington outlining his offseason plan, which includes a potential for an offensive first baseman and a paramount need for starting pitching, we're going to talk about Jase Medical. Alrighty, folks. Make sure you check out Jase Medical and use the promo code LOCKEDON for $20 off today at jasemedical.com because the Jase case is a personalized emergency medication kit that contains 5 essential antibiotics to treat the most common and deadly bacterial infections. You can also customize your case and add additional life-saving medications based on your unique needs. Jase Medical now offers customability for your Jase case with dozens of add-on medications. You choose the medications that best fit you and your family's unique needs. Jase is continually working to expand their medication offerings, including Invermectin as an option in the Jase case. Another purchase point as well is that you can get gift cards over at Jase Medical. You can buy a gift card for family or your loved one so that they can get a Jase case of their own. And remember, go to jasemedical.com and enter code LOCKEDON at checkout for a $20 discount on your order. That's promo code LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON at Jase, JASE medical.com to empower yourself today with some of the best antibiotics on the market. Alrighty, everybody, and welcome back to the Locked On Pirates podcast. This is the second segment of today's episode of the Locked On Pirates podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Again, thank you guys for tuning in as you always do on YouTube, Spotify, Odyssey, Google Play, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you find this show. And tomorrow's episode, we'll obviously be talking more off-season. If anything happens between now and then, we'll be talking about it. We'll probably be talking a lot about the off-season over the next couple of weeks with some news, hopefully, on the horizon. And Ben Cherington, speaking of, kind of outlined his off-season plan for the Pittsburgh Pirates in 2023 for the off-season. And I've said it as well. This is probably the most important offseason for Ben Cherington as a general manager. I don't think anybody would disagree with that. I don't think that that's really any I'm looking for the word, but I can't find it. But I don't think there's anything false in saying that this is probably the biggest offseason for general manager Ben Cherington and his staff. And you obviously want to make sure that you are identifying clear needs and fixing them. I think that's what Ben Cherington wants to do. I think it's something that he is empowered to do. And I think it's something that free agency and the trade market are setting it up for the Pirates to be able to do. And Jason Mackey, who obviously does phenomenal work over at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette and has also been on this show before, make sure you go check out all of his work. He does a phenomenal job. He had an entire article today from the Post-Gazette about Ben Cherington's offseason plan, outlining what would happen at the GM meetings, which also were canceled due to a stomach virus that was going around. But he started it off by saying that the Pirates have the makings of a strong starting rotation. And obviously, I think that describes, and as Jason outlines here, Mitch Keller and Johan Oviedo. Now, you obviously have mentions in this article as well of Paul Skeens, who we're all going to be very excited to see at some point. You have Roansy Contreras mentioned, Quinn Priester, Luis Ortiz. Now, those guys are all still developing. Roansy took a major step back this year. Priester didn't really show us what we thought we would see from him. Luis Ortiz took a major step back. And then you also look at another part that Jason outlines, and I quote, the continued improvement of younger arms such as Jared Jones, Anthony Solometto, and Bubba Chandler, plus the returns of JT Brubaker and Mike Burrows. Cherington adds, we're excited about the future, talking specifically about Pittsburgh's starting rotation. Now, all of those names come together, and it sounds nice. Like in a perfect world, the Pirates go into 2024 with a rotation of Mitch Keller, Johan Oviedo, Roansy Contreras, Luis Ortiz, Jared Jones, Quinn Priester's available, Paul Skeens on the wings, and all those guys are developed and very good pitchers. But it's not a perfect world. And you look at what's available in free agency. You guys heard me talk about it on my wish list on Tuesday. You heard me talk about it with Gary on Monday. There is a lot of starting pitching available in free agency this year, especially with the major need that the Pirates need, a left-handed pitcher. You have Eduardo Rodriguez. You have Alex Wood. You have Martin Perez. You have other options as well. they're going to find something about that. And Cherington added in the article from Jason, we definitely want to add to the rotation if we can, both in terms of quality and helping us win games early next year and beyond. And also just making sure that we could try to optimize the development plan for some of the younger guys. That second part, I think, is the biggest part of what Cherington is saying there to Jason, is he's saying we want to bring in guys that are going to help us win now, but not sacrifice the development plan that we have for those guys that were mentioned earlier, like Contreras, like Ortiz, like Priester, like Jones, like Skeens. But if you can help the development of those guys while also not sacrificing the quality of your rotation, which we did see in 2023, I think that's a win-win in both cases, because then you're taking some of that pressure off of these guys to feel like they need to be the guy right away. You can take your time to develop these guys. You can make sure that they turn into the type of player that you want them to be that a back end of the rotation starter or a top rotation guy behind Mitch Keller. And realistically, I think Cherington's idea is there. It's just more of the execution of how he's going to do it, especially with pitching. Now, Jason also adds, to quote, translation, Cherington can be as happy about the Pirates' pitching future as he wants. Some of his enthusiasm may be deserved too, but there's no denying the Pirates need help now, and free agency offers an avenue to do that for 2024, which it does. There is a lot of free agent pitching available for the Pittsburgh Pirates to go and pluck and pick up like a claw machine. Cherington adds, we've been mostly focused on starting pitching, both in free agency and trade. We would like to add to our position player group too, but more of our energy has gone to the pitching market early on. So he's basically doing what I would hope that the Pirates would do in the first place, is patch up the biggest hole on your roster, which is the rotation as of right now, and fix that first. Now, I've heard lots of you guys mention Rhys Hoskins. I've heard lots of you guys mention Carlos Santana. I don't think those guys are going to sign as quickly as pitchers are going to sign. So I think Cherington is playing this right here, especially outlining his offseason plan. He wants a starting pitcher, maybe even two. Will go to free agency, will go via trade if he has to. But I do like the idea that he's patching that up first. He's making sure that the biggest need on the team is taken care of first, rather than kicking the can down the road and figuring it out. And you look at another quote from Cherington in this article, we've probably had more about starting pitching than any other conversation the last few days. So, you know, there's a lot of big fish out there. You have Sonny Gray, you have Jordan Montgomery, you have Blake Snell, Eduardo Rodriguez. Are the Pirates going to be involved in that area? Maybe. But I would think that they would probably get outbid for those type of guys. But that second tier, not the third tier, not down here, the second tier, I think is where the Pirates can really do a lot of their work. And Ben Cherington, as mentioned again, really, really loves the starting pitching. And I would expect that in a week or two, we will probably have a starting pitching acquisition either in free agency or trade from Ben Cherington and the Pittsburgh Pirates. And I would not be surprised again if that comes very quickly, because as you can hear with what he's saying to Jason in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, that is their main goal right now. They want starters. That is their main goal right now. And I love it. I love that that's what they're doing. Now, as you would consider as well, Cherington and his staff are working through possible solutions to pursue this offseason. And he also adds, Cherington adds, we're interested in adding at that position. Cherington said, looking at a broad range of options, really, we need to score more runs. First base would be one potential area to add some offense. If we could do that in a way that fits with the rest of the things we wanted to do for the team, then yes, we would like to do that, which I find very interesting, because a lot of us, the defense at first base has been pretty bad, I would say, over the last 4 or 5 years at first base for the Pittsburgh Pirates. So to hear him say that he kind of wants an offensive first baseman, that gets very interesting. And Jason mentions Rhys Hoskins, Brandon Belt. And you look at what that really offers, and You look at Carlos Santana. Jaime Candelario is also a name that's mentioned in Jason's article. Joey Votto, even though I'm kind of out on the Joey Votto thing. I know a lot of people are in on the Joey Votto thing. I am massively out on it. I just don't need to see it. You also have rebound candidates that Jason mentions, like Trey Mancini, Mike Moustakas, who we all know loves to hit at PNC Park, Eric Hosmer, and Cole Calhoun. And then Cherington adds at the end, we want to get better. We know we have resources both in terms of payroll and talent to get better. We're looking at all kinds of different ways to do that. It could be more of a primary thing, could be a combination. Just going to keep working through it and try to find the best fits for us. So that was Jason's article over at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Please go check it out and read the whole thing. I just kind of like outlined the important parts, but please go read the entire thing. It's a very good article from him. And it's a very good article to read. But I think Cherington is on the right track for his offseason plan. He wants to go get starters early and often. He wants to get an offensive first baseman, which I think is very, very interesting in terms of what we've expected the Pirates to go after at first base. But I also like that he said the resources are there. The resources are available. They are there for the Pittsburgh Pirates to take. They are there for the Pittsburgh Pirates to improve, and they are there for the Pittsburgh Pirates to do whatever they want with. If they want to go out and sign a bigger guy in favor of lesser guys, then I think a lot of us would be happy. But if they want to go out and get more talent spread around the roster rather than going after the big fish, how do you feel about that also? Folks, I want to hear you in the comments about what you think about Cherington's offseason plan and how it pertains to the Pittsburgh Pirates, how you think it can work out, and what things the Pirates need to do to execute that plan. And when we come back for the final segment of today's episode of Locked On Pirates, today is the last day to vote for Ke'Bryan Hayes to win the Platinum Glove. Link is in the description of today's show. And we're going to talk about the players that he's facing and why he probably will win a Platinum Glove. Alrighty, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to the final segment of today's episode of Locked On Pirates here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates every day. To my loyal listeners, again, thank you so much for always tuning into this show, as you always do. I can't thank you enough, and that you guys are the people that I do it for. And on today's final segment, Ke'Bryan Hayes finally won a Gold Glove, folks. Finally. But now he's up for an award that many people also think he should win and probably will win, and that's the Platinum Glove. And here, right there on Rawlings, if I can get it to show up, is how you can vote. You can vote right here on your smartphone. And right now, Ke'Bryan Hayes has some company fighting against him to win the Platinum Glove. Obviously, if you paid attention to the entire Gold Glove show rather than just seeing if Ke'Bryan Hayes would win the award, the National League winners were Christian Walker, Nico Horner, Ke'Bryan Hayes, Dansby Swanson, Ian Happ, Brenton Doyle, Fernando Tatis Jr., Gabriel Moreno, Zach Wheeler, and Ha-Sung Kim, who was the Utility National League Award winner. For the American League, it was Nathaniel Lowe, Andres Jimenez, Matt Chapman, Anthony Volpe, Stephen Kwan, Kevin Kiermaier, Adolis Garcia, Jonah Heim, Jose Berrios, and Mauricio Dubon. So for those of you that don't know, the Gold Glove Award is obviously given to the best defensive player at each position in the American League and National League. They recently added a utility player to that fold, which is why Mauricio Dubon and Ha-Sung Kim, who have played multiple positions this year, were able to also get recognition. But after you win a Gold Glove, you are then entered into voting for the Platinum Glove Award, which is given out to one player and the best defensive player from their respective league. Now, you look at how it goes with the Platinum Glove. You look at people that have won it. Nolan Arenado was winning it a lot during his reign of terror of the Gold Glove Award. You look at guys like Yadier Molina have won the Platinum Glove before. There's been plenty of great defensive players that have won the Platinum Glove from Rawlings. Ke'Bryan Hayes is very interesting due to the fact that you look around at the players that are here. And Christian Walker, phenomenal first baseman for Arizona defensively, also hits the ball very well. Nico Horner, very good second baseman. Right now, you could argue that Chicago arguably has the best defensive middle infield in all of baseball with Nico Horner and then Dansby Swanson winning shortstop and second base Gold Glove honors. You then look at Ian Happ from Chicago. Chicago was a very good defensive team this year, folks, if you can't tell. Brenton Doyle was a very good center fielder for the Colorado Rockies, got some recognition, although the Rockies were not the greatest team in the world. Fernando Tatis Jr., who was a shortstop for most of his time of his career before Xander Bogaerts came over to the Padres, wins a Gold Glove at a different position. Gabriel Moreno, Zach Wheeler, Ha-Seong Kim, all very good defensively in their own right. But when you look at Ke'Bryan Hayes and where he just ranked overall in all of baseball, folks, I mean, he was absolutely nuts. And you look at the players who led it in FanGraphs and StatCast and all this stuff, it was ridiculous just how good Ke'Bryan Hayes was in the defensive run save category. I've talked about it before on the show, but I think it's worthy to talk about again. Fielding Bible, by the way, does a phenomenal job at covering this. Dalton Varsho led all players with 29 defensive runs saved, but the only player from the National League that was higher in defensive run saves outside of Ke'Bryan Hayes was Fernando Tatis Jr. at 27 with a 6 defensive run saved advantage on Hayes. Now, I do think that due to voting, Tatis does have the advantage on defensive run saved and also the advantage of just being, I would say, a much more popular player, I would say. But when you look at how good Ke'Bryan Hayes was this year, I do think it's something that he is very worthy of winning. Dansby Swanson, by the way, ended up leading at outs above average. But again, Hayes was only about 3 behind. So I think when you're looking at the voting and how it's going to come down, I would say it's probably going to be Dansby Swanson, Fernando Tatis Jr., and Ke'Bryan Hayes all like in the top 3. Don't know what order they're going to be in. Don't know how it's going to work out. But I think Ke'Bryan Hayes has done enough to at least warrant consideration for the award. And will he win it? Well, again, today's the last day to vote for it. You can vote on it in the description of today's episode. I have the link down there. But guys, thank you so much for tuning into the show, as you always do here on the Locked On Podcast Network. As always, you can follow me on Twitter right here at MVP_Ethan or at Locked On Pirates for all of your news, analysis, reactions, and opinions of everything going on in the world of the Pittsburgh Pirates. You can also subscribe, like, and comment on YouTube at Locked On Pirates. And you can find Locked On Pirates on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Odyssey, Google Play, or wherever you get your podcasts. Have a wonderful rest of your Thursday, November 9th. I will see you tomorrow. But until then, see you on the flip side, folks.